We're talking about the authority of believers in the Old Testament. And while they did not have direct authority to rebuke Satan and evil spirits, there was a measure of authority given them, a measure of protection given to them through their obedience. In other words, obedience kept them from oppression. Now, Saul opened the door by disobeying instructions that he was given by Samuel the prophet. He followed through another door, a second door he opened to demonic oppression that was a blatant act of intrusion into the office of a priest. The Philistines were coming to fight. Samuel had agreed to come on a certain day. Saul was not satisfied that he had come early enough. He waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel. This is 1 Samuel 13:8. But Samuel didn't come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him, so he's panicking. So Saul said, "Bring the burnt offerings here to me and the peace offerings." And he offered the burnt offering, and as soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. And so Samuel wasn't that late. And what I want you to see, Saul went out to meet him, and he greeted him, and Samuel said, "What have you done?" And Saul said, "When I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines had mustered at Michmash, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering." And Samuel said to Saul, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God with which he commanded you. For then the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever, but now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you." What did he do? He intruded into an office that he was not qualified to hold. God had appointed him to be king, but certainly not a priest. God had made it very clear in the law of Moses that the only ones who were authorized to offer sacrifices were the Levitical priests. They were the ones. That's it. The sons of Aaron. That's it. Only they were capable of doing what God wanted them to do in the offering of sacrifices and worship and so forth in the tabernacle, and later it would be in the temple. Now, it was exclusively their domain. God not only appointed them to do it, but he gave them strict rules. They couldn't just do anything they wanted. They had to do it in a certain way. So God's borders were flagrantly violated here by Saul. And one of the things that invites satanic oppression is people who cross borders. People who forget that God established borders and certain roles, and when people defy those things, you're inviting demonic oppression into your family. Christ answered in Matthew 19, verses 4 through 6, "Have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female? And it said, therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate it." In other words, God here defined the role of males and females. He instituted the act of marriage, the covenant of marriage. And so when we come along in the 21st century and totally defy these things and cross these borders, it releases a new spirit of darkness into our culture. And by the way, we've seen that. It's palatable. Borders make for secure relationships. When God sets up these boundaries, it's not so that he can tighten us down and restrict us, it's so that he can save us. Border crosses lose a significant amount of their protective covering. And so if I were in a place where my governmental authorities were crossing these borders, I would cry out to God and say, "Lord, forgive them and have mercy on us. This is not my choice." and therefore you take yourself out from under any penalty that might come as a result of the decisions of these people. Each believer has a sphere of authority where his faith is much more effective. And when you read the scriptures, you see that the greatest works of Christ, the great miracles, were never done for the border crossers. Never. Now, Christ loved publicans and sinners, but he did not work great miracles for them until they repented. Only when they came to see their need of a Savior and were willing to submit to the laws of God did they begin to see the great mercies of God. But his greatest works were performed for people who respected spiritual authority. Here's a great example. This is Mark chapter 5, verses 21 through 24 is where we're going to start. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name, and when he saw Jesus, he fell at his feet, and he begged him earnestly, saying, My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live. And so Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him and thronged him. Now, Jairus is the ruler of the synagogue, but he personally comes. He didn't send a servant to ask for Jesus' prayer. He personally came because it was his little daughter, and he, no doubt, really cared about her. And it wasn't just the mother who came. It wasn't grandparents who came. Years ago, a well-known minister had been out traveling all over America for a particular week. He had his own jet plane, and it was very busy, and president of a big TV network and so forth. And I was preaching in his church, and he came in on a Saturday night, and he said 3 times this week, I was invited to pray for kids who no doubt were demon-possessed. And, you know, people do sometimes go overboard on that. But when he told me what each of these 3 kids were doing, you could see there was a great level of satanic presence going on in these kids' lives. He said, I prayed, but I didn't get a one of them any help. Nothing changed. I thought it was noble of the man to at least admit that. He said, do you have any insight into that? I said, yes, I do. I said, the Father never asked you to pray. He said, how did you know that? I said, had you gotten the Father's permission and had the Father made the request, you would have been successful. But the Father didn't come. There are 4 times that Jesus ministered to people's kids. Only one time did he raise the dead out of compassion for a widow who was so broken, she probably, and by the way, she would have had no objections to what Jesus did. But the other 3 times, and 2 times, because of the presence of demons, the guardian of those children was there requesting the deliverance. And so you can see that God respects authority. Now, the Bible says that Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him, thronged him. That set the stage for a big interruption. A woman with an issue of blood came in that multitude, touched the hem of Jesus' garment. She was immediately healed. It slows down the move toward where Jairus lives. And so he's probably concerned about this. And so while he was still speaking, some came from the ruler of the synagogue's house who said, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? So the delay did, in fact, result in the little girl dying. But Jesus heard this word, and he immediately responded. And I love that. At a time when this man's getting the worst news of his life, Jesus comes back with another word. He says, do not be afraid, only believe. So the Lord began to finish what he had begun when he started walking with Jairus. Jesus is a finisher. He didn't start it just to say, I'm sorry we didn't get there in time. So he got to the house, and there was a great company of mourners, paid mourners, who were there. This is something that they did. It's part of the culture. We think it's ridiculous, but they served a purpose in that time. And they were mourning and wailing and weeping, and I'm sure they had false tears. And they're all around the little girl. And Jesus goes into the house, and he makes them all leave. And he took the father and the mother of the child. Now, why did he do that? Because these mourners are polluting the atmosphere with death. They're crying. It's over. We've lost. Death has won. That is, in effect, what they're doing. but he removed them because they don't count. They have no authority whatsoever over that little girl. Why should they be there? Why should he pray with them in the room? They have no authority. If they had equal authority with the Father, Jesus would have had to include them. But they had no authority, so he put them out of the house. And he took those who were with him, meaning Peter, James, and John. He entered the house where the child was lying. Then he took the child by the hand and said to her, Talitha cumi, which is translated, little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl arose and walked, for she was 12 years of age, and they were overcome with great amazement. What did Jesus do here? He focused on the person who had authority. In this case, it was the dad. Had there been a single parent, it would have been perhaps the mother, but it was the dad. So Jesus focused on him. He was not distracted by the good work. He didn't let that stop him. He was not distracted by the unbelieving mourners. And so Jesus stayed focused on the person with authority. And so that's why the ruler continued to receive, and the process was not stopped. And Jesus made sure that he was emboldening this man's faith, saying to him, be not afraid, only believe, and then putting these people out of the house. He's creating this sense of anticipation. Something is going to happen because he keeps zeroing in under authority. That's what got Saul in trouble. Saul invoked demons into his life because he refused to respect the authority and the boundaries that God had established for human beings, and especially for Israel. He did not respect that, and as such, he opened the door to the demonic powers that he could have been protected from, but his disobedience opened these doors. So, do not fret over people who are outside your sphere of spiritual authority. You may have encounters with people who are set against you, who defy you, but if they are not over you, if they have no authority or jurisdiction over you, do not worry. It does not matter. You do not have to have them on your side in order to have victory. This is what God said on more than one occasion. These are just two of the occasions, but there are many more. God said in Deuteronomy 11:25, also in Joshua 1:5, he said, there shall no man be able to stand before you. And some of the people who stood to fight Joshua were kings. But God said, doesn't matter. There shall no man be able to stand before you. Because when you're in obedience to God's authority, nothing can stop you from being protected. God respects that authority.